Let's get to Chris Saxman. Hey, Chris, how you doing, man?
Let's say sports fans. How are you, John?
Chris Saxman is the president of Virginia Free and a former House of Delegates member and the president of Virginia Free.
Boy.
Chris, I know we're going to get into energy and some things going on in the Virginia General Assembly for a minute, but, you know, you served in the House of Delegates in Virginia. You're a Republican. You're conservative. You look at the school shooting again in Florida. You look at this 18, 19-year-old that had this AR-15, and I want to explore raising the age to 21. Do you think that's far-fetched and out of the question?
Well, it's an interesting idea when you talk about when do constitutional rights begin, right? Because if the premise is, oh, you're taking away our constitutional rights by raising them from 18 to 19 to 20, well, when do they begin? Does that go to 17, 18, 16? Is there a point at which there is a reasonable regulation of these laws? So there's that. But there is not going to be one simple solution to a very complex problem. And we don't solve very complex problems by having these, shout fests across the country. You have to sit down at the table and break down what's really going on and solve the problems. And some of these problems are societal, they're family-oriented, the breakdown of the family, and you want to address these holistically rather than a simple flip a switch, take a pill kind of solution, which you're just not going to have in this debate.
What about exploring the idea to mandate gun ownership to 21 years old like we do for alcohol? Why would that be a bad idea, except obviously for veterans with an honorable discharge?
Well, it's an interesting idea. It's one of those, will this solve the problem? This wouldn't have solved that problem. I mean, did he purchase a gun? He'd have probably gotten a gun. If he was this committed to being a school shooter, as it was he posted on social media, he'd have gotten something. I mean, he also had smoke bombs, right? This was someone who had gone off the rails. The cops had visited his house 38 times. I mean, this is a red flag. I mean, we should be able to have some kind of red flag, law that goes, this one we need to make sure is a little bit, restricted so that his background, flags on the background check. Going from 18 to 19, I don't know if it solves the problem, or 21. I understand your logic. It's not unfounded, but I don't know if we really solve the problem versus this particular problem. And that's what you get caught up in public policy.
All right.
Because it wouldn't have solved the problem in Las Vegas, right?
Right. It wouldn't have.
It wouldn't have.
No, it wouldn't have. It wouldn't have solved that problem. And look, there's certain others, but we don't know. This is the bottom line. We don't know. And maybe if it was a little tougher for this kid to get an AR-15, maybe that would have given the FBI additional time or somebody additional time to figure it out.
Well,
the bottom line is you don't know.
The world for coming up with a solution, because everyone who wants to shout, we need to do something, are saying nothing other than we need to do something. And something is not anything. It's nothing. I mean, you have to come up with a credible plan, policy to forward. A couple of years ago, the Virginia General Assembly, working with Terry McAuliffe and the administration, advanced legislation, working with National Rifle Association, that took care of real problems in Virginia. They created an opportunity to get legislation done through compromise and sitting down at the table. They should be commended for it, especially Brian Moran and the NRA. They did get the job done here in Virginia.
Well, they did. And as everybody remembers, they negotiated the compromise for gun reciprocity, because before that you would drive from Virginia to Maryland, and if you had your gun in the car, as soon as you got over the line in D.C. or Maryland from Virginia, you were breaking the law, right? Same with Delaware.
But the key was they sat down and talked about it.
Right. They found a solution.
That's how you solve problems.
They found a solution. All right, we're with Chris Saxman, the president of Virginia Free, former House of Delegates member. Chris, let's go to the Virginia General Assembly. Let's talk about Medicaid expansion. I just put out a piece today. I'm in favor of it. I'm in favor of the House Republican compromise. They're trying to work with the governor to find a way to expand it that fits within President Trump's waiver guidelines. But they have the votes in the House. They have the governor, but not in the state Senate. What happens?
Well, they go to a conference committee. Once both the chambers will pass their budgets on Thursday. And then the negotiations begin between the Senate and the House, and one's going to theoretically win, put up air quotes around win, But the House and the governor are very well positioned. They've got very credible arguments on expanding Medicaid because it's not a straight expansion. There's a lot of parameters to it. I think the House put out a slide or a chart that showed the savings from Medicaid expansion. Even Jim Bacon supports Medicaid expansion now. So I think it's going to happen. I don't know what the final form is going to be, but I do think you're going to see Medicaid expansion in about 2 weeks when the deals are finally done in the conference committee. So,
but how will it happen? I mean, if there's 20 no votes in the Senate, if there's 21 no votes, or 20 no votes, how? I mean, just walk us through.
21 no votes. There's probably a couple in there that are going, I can probably vote for that plan. But, for the members that I've spoken to, they're not receiving any negative pushback in their districts at all. And once that becomes more known, that it's safe to do that. Now, I do think that they run a problem if they do the Medicaid expansion with the tax increase that they're talking about. Because going back home to your base saying I expanded Medicaid and raised taxes would be a more difficult sell just for the Republican base. If that becomes, I don't know if that's going to be translated. So like in anything else, you have to go back and explain what you did, and this has to be put in some pretty simple terms when you go back to your district, when you go back to your local committee meetings, and the like. So you have to get your messaging really tight, and I think once they do that, you'll start seeing some movement on the Senate side. But again, the Senate's going to get something in return, right? In any negotiation, it's not what you want; it's what you're willing to give up. The question is, what are the governor and the House? What do they need to give up to the Senate to get this?
So give us an example. What would Republicans in the Senate
this
get?
This is a big ask. I don't know. It could be anything for these guys that they've not shown their cards. And the Senate leadership is very, very good about not showing their cards. They saw this coming. They weren't aware of it when it actually popped. There was some, anger within the Senate caucus for Republicans not showing it. But look, when the House passes a work requirement bill for Medicaid and you don't know it's coming, I mean, come on, you're just not paying attention, right?
Right.
This was coming. The only question is, what are they going to get in return if it's going to end up being that way?
All right. So
and
look,
that's
so
the magic of the deal.
The Republican House will have a budget. The Senate will have a budget. The Republican House budget includes Medicaid expansion and also a bed tax for hospitals. The Senate bill does not. Emmett Hanger, one of the potential votes for Medicaid expansion, said he's opposed to the hospital bed tax that would potentially fund the gap if there is a gap. So The question is, it gets in reconciliation, but that doesn't matter because if you've got 20 senators minus Emmett Hanger that are going to vote no, there is no budget. So what happens? Just walk us through the reality of this.
Well, the reality is, look, here, it works out when you go into the conference committee on the budget is the most important committee in the General Assembly. And what happens is, Senator Hanger will be across the table from Chairman Cox, and they're going to go, okay, what's it going to take to get this done? We have this on the table, including a bed tax. And Emmett can go, well, I'll take it without the bed tax because I don't want my guys in my caucus, we'll relent on this. We can deal with the expansion, but we can't do this and the tax, as an example. Right, when they're in the negotiations and it's mano a mano, they're going to have to make these concessions and have to work with their caucus leadership to get it done. And they're on the clock. This has to be done by, March 9th, March 10th. So they got 2 weeks. This is how Virginia works, and there's a lot of things that go. There's a lot of bumps that go in the night in the sausage making. And I hate to mix metaphors there, but that's what happens. I mean, they all know what they want out of the budget negotiations, and they're all holding cards, and it could be anything.
So what happens if the Senate and the House simply can't agree on a budget, right? The House has the votes to expand Medicaid.
They will not give that victory to Ralph Northam. The House is already there, right? This is how it happened in 2004. We went to June before we got a budget because we didn't want to raise taxes. And it really divided the House, the Republican Party. They're not going to do that again. They'll make up their mind. Something will get done.
So they're not going to let this get to the veto session and shut the government down and all that.
You don't get to a veto session unless you have a final session. So the session has to end, right? They can keep going, but they're going to declare, sine die at some point. And my guess is they're going to do it on March 10th. They're going to get a deal. It will get done. Negotiations have started long ago, and it will get done. I mean, to draw up the the apocalyptic scenario where they go out without a budget. It ain't going to happen. You have to have a budget.
All right, so
it's not going to shut the government down over an issue that polls in the 80s.
It sounds like, Chris Saxman, that you're predicting there is going to be a compromise worked out in reconciliation.
Yes. Well, it's a conference committee.
The conference committee. The conference committee, the right term for it. So they go to the conference committee, and you're projecting that there is going to be a compromise that is going to include Medicaid expansion, and you think that Emmett Hanger is going to be the wheel in this on the Senate side for the Republicans?
I don't want to say the wheel, but he's certainly the key player. He's co-chairman of finance, and I would imagine that he is, and he's been in favor of Medicaid expansion in the past,
right?
Or has been at least tips the hand. But you have to take a look at this particular plan that the House Republicans have come up with. I mean, it's not just straight Medicaid expansion. It's just not.
Mm-hmm.
And once they start looking at what this thing really does in the House proposals, where they find the savings, it might appeal to the Senate. But right now they're working through the politics and the policy at the same time, and they might end up going, well, this is okay. We can deal with this. It's actually not that bad. Or they're going to go, no way, until the very end and cut a better deal for themselves. But, this also helps the Senate Republicans going to the primaries next year when, it'll save them a lot of money in their caucus to not have to fight off primary battles.
Well,
which they like.
I put this in my column today. A Republican pollster just did a poll a month ago. 83% of Virginians favor expanding medical coverage through Medicaid. 83% of Virginians. Now, this is done by a Republican pollster, Chris Saxman. Republicans have been defeated in Virginia 10 straight times, as everybody knows. Why would Republicans not want to get on the side of 83% is beyond me.
Well, I mean, the hurdle for them politically is some of them are very concerned about the hole in the budget that would be created, that they have talked about. This is one of those issues where both sides are right to a degree, and now that you're down to the fact that they didn't repeal and replace Obamacare, and it is going forward, you make the best of what you got, right? That's not what you're supposed to do. And you saw that in Terry Kilgore's editorial when he came out and said, look, I'm going to support this. And, I think that was a tip of the hat from the House leadership that this is going to come out of the budget, which it did, obviously. But once they get past the messaging and can go back to their constituents and say, look, this is where things are. This is what we're going to do. And here are the benefits. You always overcome objections with benefits, right? You don't go back and defend yourself. You sell benefits. And that's what they have to do at this point. And from the people that I've talked to who have supported this and are on the record, they're not hearing any negative pushback from the districts. And once they start sitting in those caucus meetings saying, look, guys, I'm only getting support from back home. It's not a bad thing. So when it comes up on the floor on Thursday, vote against it on the floor in the amendment, but vote for the budget so we can get this thing done. And that's what's going to happen. You'll see a lot of folks vote against the Medicaid expansion on the floor as an amendment, but they'll vote for the budget when it passes.
All right, so they'll vote for the budget, which includes the Medicaid expansion in both chambers, but they'll not vote for Medicaid expansion separately because they don't want to go on the record for that. But, it's just semantics, right? It's the same thing.
It is and it isn't. I mean, you have a symbolic – it would be a symbolic vote for some, because if you vote against everything in the budget, then you're on the hook for voting against all the good things in the budget that people like. And that's
yeah, but you're not – the budget vote isn't – line item by line item. You either vote for it or not. So if you vote no.
What you do is you go. The budget is presented as the budget, and then you spend all day looking at all the amendments to the introduced budget, and you can take them out of the block and vote on them individually. And they are debated individually, and they're voted on individually. And then you have the final vote on the entire budget, and then it goes over to the Senate. And the Senate comes back with it, and then you go and you have a final budget, and then it goes to the governor. So even though you can vote against the House and the Senate budget and the combined budget, you can still vote for the budget after the governor amends it. So you have 3 and 4 whacks at voting for the budget.
And then you also have all the various amendments you can vote up or down.
Exactly. Right. So you can go back and say, look, I voted against it, but I voted for the budget after it was done.
Right. So that gives somebody that might get a House member or Senate, a Republican senator, that gives them cover to protect themselves against what could be a primary challenge and somebody saying that they voted to expand Obamacare, right?
Yeah, look, I held the line as long as I could, but I voted for the budget because it did X, Y, and Z for my district. Look, that's just the reality in politics, right?
Yeah.
That's just what happens.
That's just reality.
But I don't think many guys are going to fall on the sword butt so much on this one. The caucus in the House of Republicans is very divided right now. Some people are really upset, but this horse is out of the barn. It's 2-on-1 now, and it's going to 2-on-1 wins every time in politics. We learned that in 2004, big time.
No doubt about it. Chris Saxman, thanks for that great update. Right, you know how the sausage is made down there.
Thursday sausage making day. Don't look, just eat.
Just eat it, right? All right. Want to thank Chris Saxman for being with us today. President, Virginia Free, former House of Delegates member. Thanks for that great update, man.